The hardest part about finishing any task is actually starting it. And how do we start working? First thing to know is that before we begin, our brain unconsciously thinks about the most complex and confusing part of that task. That's why any job seems super hard, and we irresponsibly shift our attention to all sorts of unimportant things just to avoid doing it. For example, suddenly sending someone a message becomes crucially important. Then you feel like listening to music. After that, you want to pour yourself some tea and so on. Basically, we don't feel ready enough to start working, and we constantly lack motivation. Minutes, hours, days pass, sometimes even a whole week, but since we never felt prepared, we don't make any progress on that task. Well, I've got bad news for you. If you just keep waiting, nothing will ever happen. You've probably heard the phrase, starting is half the battle. I'd even say starting is 80% of it, because when you initiate something, a process called the Zeigarnik Effect kicks in our brain. The Zeigarnik Effect was developed in the 20th century by Lithuanian Jewish psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who lived in the Soviet Union. The effect is that people remember interrupted tasks better than completed ones. In other words, if we've already started working on something, we'll constantly feel discomfort and unease until we finish it, because it just won't leave our head. That's why we try to spend more time focusing on the work in order to complete it. You can explain the principle behind this effect with an everyday life example. Like TV shows, each episode ends on a cliffhanger, causing us discomfort and making us impatiently wait for the next one. Plus, the ending always sticks in your memory. And when discussing the episode, people usually say, "As always, it ended at the most exciting part. I wonder what will happen next." Thanks to this effect, when we do finish a task, we think, turns out it wasn't as hard as I thought. It all happens because after we start, the Zeigarnik Effect kicks in, further focusing us on the work and boosting our enthusiasm. Now let's talk about how to actually make yourself start. For this, I'll share a few methods we use. Some are world famous, their effectiveness has been proven. Others we developed ourselves, so I can't say for sure how effective or ineffective they'll be for you, but I'll share them anyway and you can try them out. Method #1, the 5-second rule. You can read about it in detail in the book of the same name by American CNN host Mel Robbins. I'll explain how to apply this method. The 5-second rule is pretty simple. You just count down from 5 to 0, and as soon as you say 0, you take steps to start working. For example, I need to record voiceover for this video, but I don't feel like doing it, constantly procrastinating. To overcome this, I start counting in my head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. After that, I get up, grab the microphone and recorder, and start setting them up. We don't know exactly why this method works or the science behind it, but just from applying it to ourselves, I can confidently say, it works. You probably remember from childhood that whenever we counted down, something always happened. It's the same when launching a rocket. The countdown goes from 10 to 0, and as soon as 0 inches is announced, the rocket takes off. This mental mechanism probably works on the same principle. Counting from 5 to 0 is also more effective than from 1 to 5, because after 5 there's still a continuation, making it less impactful. Maybe there's no real difference between these examples, we're just psyching ourselves up and believing in it. I do find it way more convenient to count from 5 down to 0, too. I'll also note that the number of seconds doesn't matter. It can be 5, 4, 3. Use whichever digit you like best, and which gives you a bigger push. Method #2. We called it easy and simple. We made up this name ourselves to label this little trick. Feel free to come up with your own name for it. So how does this stage work? To start any task, I come up with and write down the 3 most basic sequential steps for that task I want to start. I allow myself to only do those 3 steps, telling myself, after the 3rd step, I can quit working, or if I want, I can keep going and decide after step 3. I'm not deceiving myself at all. If after 3 steps I don't want to continue, I won't force myself. But honestly, there have been very few times when I didn't want to keep going after step 3. For example, let's say I need to set up a Google Ads campaign, but I'm not feeling motivated and keep putting it off. Then I break it down into 3 steps. Step 1, open my computer. Step 2, log into my Google Ads account. Step 3, click the Create New Campaign button. I tell myself I only have to do those 3 steps. After that, I'm free to do whatever I want. But after clicking Create New Campaign, I naturally want to take the next step and don't feel like stopping. The page has me hooked, and I end up finishing what I started. And then comes the satisfying part of crossing that item off my to-do list. This is a great method. First, those 3 super simple steps never seem daunting. You can easily start them. Second, after you've started, taking one more step doesn't seem that hard anymore. Method #3. We call it the artificially natural deadline. We came up with this one ourselves, and it works wonderfully for us, so I wanted to share it with you. If it doesn't work for you, you can always focus on the first 2 methods. The artificially natural deadline method works like this. If we need to study something, work on a project, etc., the first thing we do is schedule a meeting with someone whose opinion matters a lot to us, to discuss or present what we've done. So the meeting date becomes a sort of deadline for me. Let's say I need to prepare a presentation. Obviously, you can't put together a great presentation in just a couple of days, especially if you need to research the topic first. But we know we'll procrastinate until the last minute. So we pick someone important and schedule a meeting with them, say, in a week, to show them the finished presentation and get their feedback. Once that time is set, I've essentially given myself an artificial yet natural deadline, so I have to be ready by then. I have no other choice, so I'm forced to start working because I have a due date. It's crucial that this is someone you really don't want to reschedule or show up unprepared for. Another example. When we first started posting videos on our channel, every time to avoid delaying the launch, we'd tell our friends or acquaintances, "Be sure to check out our video that's coming out on this date and time." In reality, we hadn't even started making it yet. So we artificially created a deadline for ourselves, and come hell or high water, we had to get it done in time. I know what you're thinking, but what if there are things we can't finish on time? What if we set a deadline and don't make it? Let me assure you, if you have to, you'll make it happen. We've all been in situations, maybe back in school or college, when our star student friends would start studying 20 days before an exam, while we'd start cramming just 3 days or even 1 day before, yet we still managed to learn everything and get the grade we needed. I've personally had many situations like that. Want to know why it happens? Because when we're in a do-or-die situation, with our back against the wall, our brain kicks into high gear to find the shortest path to the goal and goes for it. Believe me, our brain is way more capable than we give it credit for. Sometimes it's worth trusting it. In those crunch times, it always prioritizes the important stuff, and you don't even think about Facebook, friends, shows, or anything else. Plus, your ability to absorb and memorize information increases, so sometimes it's worth creating those artificial deadlines for yourself. One more thing. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with your loved ones. That's it for the key methods we use to motivate ourselves and stop procrastinating. As I mentioned, some are world-renowned techniques, while others we developed through trial and error for our own use. But they've been super helpful for us in getting started on tasks and projects when we're struggling with motivation and beating procrastination. The 5-second rule, breaking it down into 3 easy steps, creating artificial deadlines. These are just psychological tricks to hack our brains into shifting gears. They make the hardest part, starting, so much more manageable. Because once you begin, thanks to the Zeigarnik Effect, your mind locks on to completing what you've initiated. I'd recommend experimenting with different techniques and sticking to what works best for you personally. We all have unique psychological patterns and motivations. The key is finding the right mental triggers to overcome inertia. With a bit of practice, you'll be able to wrestle your brain into a productive mode whenever you need to power through an important task. Just don't let perfectionism or overthinking paralyze you before you've even started. Dive in, get that initial momentum going, and trust that your focused mind will figure out the rest once you're in the flow state. The first step is always the toughest, but it gets easier from there. So use whatever mental games or commitment devices you need to quit stalling and just begin. You've got this.